right, well, welcome to our webinar, The Future After Drupal 7, Exploring Alternatives and New Opportunities. My name is Maciej Lukianski, and I'm the founder of Droptica, a Drupal agency dealing with Drupal. We deal with Drupal since 13 years now, and we've migrated from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, 9, 10, and 11 right now. We've done a lot of Drupal migrations, and today we're going to share some of our experiences. The agenda is as follows. We're going to discuss Drupal 7 end of life and what does it mean. We're going to talk about options, Drupal 7 long-term support, upgrading to Drupal, or migrating off of Drupal. Typically, if you have a Drupal website, you have these three choices. You can stay on Drupal 7, migrate over to Drupal, to the latest Drupal, or migrate off of Drupal. And we're going to talk about when to choose which option, and at the end, we're going to show some case studies from the work that we've already done. So Drupal 7 end of life. The Drupal 7 end of life will happen on the 5th of January 2025. And what does it mean? Well, it means that Drupal community will no longer publish security updates. That's the most important change. Also, Drupal modules will be, Drupal 7 modules will be removed from the visual download component on Drupal websites, so it's going to be more difficult to search for them. Drupal will no longer be kept compatible with new PHP versions. So what it means is that all the libraries, SDKs, which evolve over time, will slowly stop working with Drupal 7. Also, if there are any new services that release their SDKs, they will release them on PHP versions on which Drupal 7 will no longer be working, so it's going to be difficult to use them. And overall development will become more difficult because Drupal 7 will not get any new modules. The searching for Drupal 7 modules will be more difficult, and documentation will get older and older. So what are the options? You can remain on Drupal 7 long-term support. You can upgrade to the latest Drupal. Currently, there's a version 11, or you can migrate off of Drupal onto something else. There are more options right now than there were 10 years ago when websites were being built on Drupal 7. We're going to talk through all these three options and what each entails and what the outcomes would be, and we're going to give some tips on to how to manage that. So we're going to start from the easiest one, remaining on Drupal 7, not doing a lot, just staying on. How will it look like? We can use a parallel of Drupal 6 to see how it's going to be to stay on Drupal 7. So right now on Drupal 6, there are over 9,000 websites still. That's at least what Drupal org reports. There is one official supporting Drupal partner of Drupal 6, and Drupal 6 received last commit 2 years ago, at least as of recording this. That's what you can find out on GitHub. For Drupal 7 also, there is a plan of a long-term support for websites who cannot, or for whatever reason do not want to migrate. It's not an official security release. It's a support group consisting of voluntary companies that will want to support Drupal 7. How many of those will be there? How many developers? It is unknown. Well, looking at Drupal 6, after a while, there's not many companies staying there. How successful it will be, it's uncertain at the moment. We in Droptica, for example, we are committed to supporting our Drupal 7 clients as long as it takes. And post LTS, we will use the tools and resources available, and we will look at the effort that the community is making in supporting the Drupal 7 websites even after the official support is finished. Yeah, but how will it look like? It's still uncertain and unknown exactly what can be expected. There are a few considerations if you're thinking about using the long-term support. Overall, remaining on Drupal 7 is a dead end. There's a potential long-term life of even multiple years. As you can see, Drupal 6 is many years. The LTS for Drupal 6 has finished many years ago, and there are still Drupal 6 websites out there which work. But if you have a Drupal 7 website and decide to stay after the LTS is finished, uh, after the support is finished, it might be difficult to grow your website. It might be difficult to change and adapt it. The new modules will not come out. It's more in general, it's more of a freeze and maintain as is rather than develop it further. Especially another consideration is a legal matter. If you have user data, there's higher risk. Like if an event breach would occur, it would be really difficult to prove that you're diligent if you're running an outdated system. So especially if you have user data, we would recommend looking for alternatives to staying on Drupal 7, because maintaining security will get more and more difficult over time. Now, when to remain on Drupal 7, there are probably 3 scenarios where that makes the most sense. So obviously, if your plans are not clear, you have current budget constraints, and you feel that things will resolve themselves in the future. For example, you might be going through a rebranding right now, and you feel that migrating over to Drupal 7, your current websites, doesn't really make sense, because you're going to move over the old branding and then you're going to have to redo the whole theming again in half a year maybe. It might make sense to stick out a while and then do the migrations afterwards. Maybe you're going through some reorganization and need to hold off. That you can do that. That makes sense. You don't have to migrate right now, and you can plan to do this in 2025, maybe even a bit later, if that makes sense for you. Also, if you have an online asset which makes money, but it's not such a huge revenue stream that it would warrant a migration investment, you don't have to worry. You can kind of ride it out for many years. You can continue holding on to it, and you can use it on Drupal 7. You just have to prepare for that. And also, there's a situation where you've built something which is used internally. Many Drupal 7 was quite often used to build internal tools for companies. And if you have a tool, for example, a warehouse management system, or some other asset management system, or whatever that is used internally in your organization and is not accessible from the outside, from the web, and it works, and you don't really have a reason to change it, you might just secure it even more isolated from external access, so that only your employees who maybe log in via VPN or some other tool can access this website, and then you keep your security and your network level more than at the level of the application. That might be a solution that you might choose as well, and not invest in rebuilding the software if it works and it can be secured in some other way. Now, if you're choosing staying on Drupal 7, there are things you should take into account and prepare a little bit. So firstly, you should plan for the whole stack. How are you going to maintain it? Drupal 7 is not just the PHP code that is written. It's the whole stack, starting from the server through PHP versions, MySQL, and everything. As time goes by, these things will not be supported, and you have to have a plan for how to be able to recreate that. In case you need to create a new server, you might need to migrate servers or whatever. Eventually, it's going to be really difficult to get the versions of the software that you're using, maybe the libraries that you have on the server, maybe, for example, for PDF generation or some other types of libraries, there will not be available online for the older versions of PHP, so you have to plan for the whole stack. The same as with MySQL version. It might be difficult to install the particular one, or even the kernel of your Linux server, the one that you're running, might be difficult. A very common solution that works quite well is contain using containers, for example, Docker. You can create a whole container with all the libraries, the whole stack inside of a container. You can save that and use it to redeploy your application into various places. But you have to plan for that. You have to have a plan for how you're going to manage the whole stack. So just keep that in mind. And the other thing is talent. Make sure you have people who will be able to take care of your Drupal 7 website. Sorry. For example, if you look at Drupal 6 right now, it is really difficult to find people who know Drupal 6, who remember Drupal 6, and even more difficult to find people who are willing to work on Drupal 6 because it's so old and it's a really legacy software. So maintaining that, there aren't too many keen developers. So look at your agency, look at your organization, and have an honest discussion about how is the talent going to be retained, so that you don't find yourself in a situation that the last developer that knew Drupal 7 left our company and we cannot support you anymore. That is a situation you don't want to get yourself into. For example, in Droptica, we still train every new hire in Drupal 7 to be able to support the clients that we have that are on Drupal 7 and have not yet migrated. So we make sure that all our staff are able to do the work. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's pretty much that. If you remain on Drupal 7 and take care of these considerations, you should be fine. And if you make sure you maintain the security of the application after the support is finished, you can continue using it for a longer time. Just remember, it's going to be more and more difficult to maintain, and also more and more difficult to grow the application or change it if you want. Okay, now we're going to discuss migrating to Drupal 11. That's the current version of Drupal, so it makes sense to migrate to that right now. The advantages, well, there are many advantages of Drupal 11. It's a really good foundation to build long-lasting growing system. Also from Drupal 8, starting from Drupal 8, these migrations from Drupal 8 to 9, from 9 to 10, from now from 10 to 11 are not as huge. The problem, like Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, differ substantially, and the migration path there is difficult, and it's a replatforming really. Going forward, it requires some work, but it's not a rebuild of the whole application. You don't have to have such a huge plan for that. Drupal 11 is very modern. It's extensible and future-proof. If you have long-term plans for your application, this is what you should choose. You should upgrade to Drupal 11 and continue building on Drupal, which is following the best standards of the modern web development, and it will allow you to grow long-term. Definitely, if you have long-term plans for your application and you want to invest in it and use it for years to come, migrating to Drupal 11 is the good way to go. Right, but just to bear in mind, there are some things you have to prepare for. Drupal 8 plus, I would call it, so 8, 9, 10, 11. Drupal 11 is different, a little bit different than Drupal 7. So moving from Drupal 7 to Drupal 11 is a replatforming. It's a complete rewrite, change of the application. It's not a simple upgrade. Typically, in IT, it's advised not to do a whole replatforming if you have an important piece of software. It's risky. There are histories of replatforming failures all over the web. I mentioned here some of them, like Healthcare Gov in 2013, Lufthansa, British Airways, Toys R Us tried to replatform their e-commerce business, online application, and that was like the final nail to the coffin of that company. So replatforming it comes with a lot of risks. So moving from Drupal 7 to Drupal 11 might not be an easy project. you have to take that into account. That said, if you really want to grow your website, you cannot really stay on Drupal 7, so you have to choose something. And we're gonna go in this webinar through various options of de-risking this replatforming, but for now, just make sure that it's not a simple, easy update. It's a more involved process. Also, it's worth noting that Drupal 11 is for now more maintenance heavy than Drupal 7. The community is working to improve the update process, but updating Drupal especially from the versions 8 to 9, 9 to 10, which come out every 18 months or so, it takes a bit some time. It's not as huge as from Drupal 7 to Drupal 11, but it's still some work, and estimating roughly, if you, for example, have 150 modules on your website, it might take you 300 hours every 18 months. So I would estimate that if you have a bigger website, maintaining it on Drupal 11 might take 150 hours of work a year. So that's something to bear in mind. On Drupal 7, if you have a website on Drupal 7 for a long time, you might be used to a very simple update process when you just have a one command in shell and you update that and there are no issues, nothing to rewrite. That's because Drupal 7 is not supported for a very long time, really, in a sense that people are not really adding a lot of new functionality and not changing it a lot. Drupal 8, Drupal 11 is growing, is evolving, is being developed, and this comes with the fact that there are changes being added to it. There are no changes coming into Drupal 7 at all for a long time. So you might be used to a very slow, easy update process because these are just really security updates on the Drupal 7 and the modules. Typically on Drupal 11 there are functionalities, code changes and all that, so some modules are being changed, some modules are being added new, some are not maintained anymore, and they lose compatibility with the newer versions a little bit, so you have to kind of work through that a little bit. So it takes some time. So if you plan, if that you take that into account in your budgetary considerations, that maintaining that in a secure way, latest Drupal in a secured way, is a bit more involving. Okay, and how we will discuss migrating to Drupal 11, we will kind of split it out into simpler projects and then bigger, more complex projects. There are two approaches. The simpler projects are easier and less risky. The bigger, more complex projects have the replatforming risks associated with them, and we're going to talk through how to mitigate that. Okay, but before we dive in, I want to talk about two types of migrations that you can do in Drupal. So the first one is a one-to-one migration, where you have a Drupal 7 website or a system, and you want to migrate to Drupal 11 and have the exact same system website. So the look and feel front end, you just want to upgrade to have the security, but you don't need any changes, any redesign or anything. Such an update is much easier. It's cheaper. It's also safer because you see what you're supposed to get exactly. So testing can be reduced. It's easier for the development team. The product owner doesn't have to be as much involved. Like on the simple websites, you can really just kind of send your agency or your developers a copy of the website and tell them, okay, I want this exact website on Drupal 11. They can build it for you, give it back to you. You can test it, or they can test it, and that's that. You can launch it and you're done. Simple and easy, but it's still going to cost you money. So if you have a need and your website feels a bit outdated, you feel you should upgrade it anyway soon, this migration is so huge that this is really a rebuild. So you might, if you feel, you might as well improve and redesign it. And that's the other type of migration. like a modernization of the application, where while you're moving your website to Drupal 11, you're also improving the theme, look and feel. Maybe you're improving processes. If it's a more complex system, you might want to spend some time to improve things that on Drupal 7 are not working that well, and you've been living with them, but now when you're changing the systems, you might want to work on that. For example, if you have some performance issues, maybe you have some data, maybe you have some SQL structures based on fields and nodes, which cause a lot of SQL joins, and you might want to restructure that, for example, into custom entities, which will be better at holding data and querying the data in a more efficient way. So if you're, and especially front end team as well, like if you're moving over to Drupal 11, like if you think that over the next 1 or 2 years you will want to do a redesign anyway, well, that might be the moment now then, from when you're migrating from Drupal 7 to Drupal 11, do the redesign right now. It's gonna be overall cheaper than migrate over one-to-one and then redesign. Is going to be like, so migrate over and redesign is going to be more expensive than migrate over with the redesign at the same time. Obviously it takes more time because you have to design and scope and everything. but so there are these two types of migrations, one-to-one and the modernization one. And so migrating over to Drupal 11 for the simpler projects, I recommend the one-off migration here. You can try Drupal comes, the higher versions of Drupal come with migration scripts from Drupal 7. So for simpler websites, you might just be able to upgrade. You will have to create your own theme, obviously, but you might be able to upgrade in such a way that all your field types, node types, all of that will be created automatically for you, and the only thing left will be creation of the theme. That might work. There are some additional modules which allow you to improve your migration, and that might be a simple process. And exactly as I said before, if you choose one-to-one, you can just kind of hand over the copy of the website to your agency and then get a new website on Drupal 11. It's fairly easy to, once you have access to copy in the data of the website and the database, it's fairly easy to estimate how much work that will require. And even if you don't have access to the website from the code perspective, just the admin UI, you can get a good estimate of the effort required to update such a website. If you want to retheme and restructure, obviously there's some scoping involved and some design involved, but still you can come up with a good good number. So for bigger projects, planning is required. Bigger projects are difficult and risky. This is the replatforming. So as history shows us, and you can search on Google, replatforming failures, and you will have a huge history of replatforming failures that companies went through. If you have a big system, especially if it's a business critical system that is built on Drupal 7, and you're looking for how to update that, you have to bear in mind that this project involves risk, and you should take steps to mitigate these risks and to take care of them, so that you can securely move over to Drupal 11. I listed some of the risks here. For example, coordinating external integrated systems, especially if they consume data. Maybe there are mobile apps that use your APIs, maybe some ERP systems, maybe some emailing systems. If your website is connected to a lot of things, maybe some external services are using your APIs, completely external services that you exposed your APIs to. Maybe there are many people using your system in various ways, pulling reports, downloading stuff, maybe adding content, transactional data. If it's a live system, maintaining integrity of data while migrating and maintaining all these connections to all the other systems. It's not very easy, so you have to really plan for that. Also, you have to take into account that if you have a big system, migrating over to Drupal 11, it takes time. You have to build the system on Drupal 11, migrate over the data. Typically that takes months. In a very big project, it might take up to a year even, or maybe longer. So if you have such a time span, a feature freeze on your current application might not be possible. So you might have to be developing two systems at the same time, building the new one and changing the current one. And then at the end, you might have to move over the changes from Drupal 7 that you've done while the Drupal 11 was being built over again. So that's something to consider. You might have to have two teams managing two websites at the same time. Yeah, there's a huge possibility of errors, bugs, issues, and problems when you're doing platforming in general. It's not pertaining to Drupal 11 in particular. It's the fact that every huge replatforming involves a lot of risk of things going wrong. Planning for rollback is problematic. You have to think about what if we launch and things don't work as we expected. How do we roll back? How do we manage? You have to take that into account, and very extensive testing is required, and planning for the testing to mitigate that. I'm going to talk a bit about that later as well. So there are three approaches you can take to a bigger project, which can reduce the risk a bit. So the first one is the one of migration and switch, replatforming. That's it's the most risky one, because you're building the system out, and then at one go you're suddenly changing for all the users at a particular point in time. And of course you test it well and you do your best, but actually the real life scenario shows, and the examples of healthcare gov and all the other ones that I mentioned beforehand show that even with the best effort, there is a lot of risk of things going wrong. And if I were to recommend how to mitigate that risk, especially if it's a business critical application for your business, is maybe consider a one-to-one migration to reduce the risk of issues, of changes in code or systems or workflows. Like especially something that is a huge business risk is if you're rewriting your application onto Drupal 11, which is a business critical application, and you want to at the same time change workflows and mechanisms of how people interact with the application. That's a lot of risks in one go. So maybe one-to-one, so that the users at least initially don't feel any changes. You've changed the underlying infrastructure and system, and once that's stabilized after the launch, then you can start changing on that. That would be my recommendation. You have to document all your features before migration to make sure that everything is being transferred over. It's really easy to miss things, especially in a very big system with a lot of APIs and moving parts. And then testing. Plan how you're going to be testing everything, and we typically try to automate as much as possible, automate data transfers. If you write a migration that transfers over a lot of data, often the data might get corrupted in the migration process. So you have to write tests which check that everything was transferred over correctly, that all the pieces of information are being transferred over, so that you don't end up with a system which is live and you learn only after the fact that some of the data that you thought moved over didn't really. So write tests for that. Write extensive tests for all the other functionality to make sure that, especially if you're building the system over a longer period of time and parts of the functionality are being delivered, tested, it's really good to write regression tests on them, so that when other pieces of functionality are being released, there are regression tests which check that nothing in the things that have already been tested has broken, so that when you release, you know that all the functionality is working. Also, even though automated tests test a lot, it's really, really good to have users do the UAT testing, and that would be some testers dedicated from the company, from your side, but also all the end users of various types. If you have maybe customers, if you have maybe power users in your system, if you have people with various levels of access, all of these people, it would be really good if they really have time, dedicated time, sometimes even a few days maybe, to really test the application really well, so that you iron out all the bugs before launching. And final, last but not least, load testing, especially for big applications with multiple users. Testing that the application works under when the amount of users expected that to use it are actually using it is critical. Often on Drupal 7, as your system grew, you made a lot of optimizations. On Drupal 8, you have to see where optimizations are required with your usage, your use cases, your workloads. You have to take that into account. And there are ways to create artificial stress testing, where you generate the load that your typical users would create on your website, and you see how the new website is performing. You don't want to release the website only for it to go down very quickly and then spend time fixing it in production where it's not responding. Some other things that can be done, you can consider parallel running, where you have the old system still up and you have the new system, and some of your users, you're letting in on the new system and they test it out. That's very common in SaaS software, where there's a new version and you can try it out, but you can revert to the old version for a while, and the bugs are being ironed out on the new version, while the old version is still available for users to revert. It's not easy to do on Drupal, but it's in some cases possible. You also plan for a rollback if possible, so that you have a clear strategy of: we release, we verify that everything works. What do we do if we realize that we still need to work on the application? We have to revert back. How do we manage that? And also choose the right time for switchover, which is obvious. Like, don't choose your peak time to switch over the application in a one-off migration. Overall, if you choose the one-off, so the build application switch over, it's as I said, the cheapest, but you have to take care of all these risks in a really professional manner to make sure that when you're launching, you're not jeopardizing your operation because of the launch. The other option is the phased approach. It reduces the risk a lot. Here you're migrating parts of the application. Not all applications allow you to do that easily, but some do. So for example, section by section, functionality by functionality. For websites, it's easier. For websites, you can create a layer on top where users are being redirected between two websites, and the menu redirects them between two websites, and they don't really feel it, but they're like, when they're browsing your website, they're being moved between two Drupal installations, and you're moving section by section over, especially if you have a lot of content which has to be reorganized and redone on your new Drupal website. Relaunching section by section might be a solution for you. So you might, for example, have the front page and some product pages already on the new version, but you might have the blog on the old version still, or maybe your careers section or whatever you have there. And then you can move these things over one by one, and this reduces risk because a lot of people are still using initially the old version. It's easier to test a smaller portion of the application released initially, and you can see how the users react, how they interact. If everything works correctly, you can move over the next parts. There are also some options where you have the application where you sync some of the data. The data is on two systems at the same time, all the time, so users have access on two systems to parts of the data, and this way you can move over some functionality which is data related. Such a phased approach is more predictable because you're releasing smaller versions of the application to the world, and initially you're still using a lot of the old and trusted application, and slowly you're moving users more and more to the new application, and risk of a huge one-off gigantic failure is dramatically reduced. You can iron out the bugs as they happen, and it's much more predictable. It's easier to roll back these changes as well. Often it takes more time, it's more involving, requires more planning. But if you have a huge business critical application, that probably might be an option for you, even at least to consider that. And also a similar decoupled approach where you're not only moving functionality one by one to a new application, but to several applications maybe. Especially this makes a special sense if you already feel that the Drupal front end is not sufficient to your users. A lot of startups have this situation where they feel that they want a more interactive front end, like JavaScript, for example, allows you to. Maybe a progressive web app application. They maybe have a lot of users on the phone which want a more seamless look and feel, and then you might migrate the front end to JavaScript, for example, or React, and then you can migrate backend slowly, one by one, functionality by functionality, and redirect traffic from front end to the particular sections of your website. That's something of your backend website. That's something that works really well. Also, you can decouple a little bit to SaaS applications. That happens quite often. 10 years ago, there weren't that many that good SaaS applications, and people were building functionality on top of Drupal 7 that right now is quite often better served by SaaS applications, and you migrate some of your website to Drupal 11, but some of the functionality you might migrate off to SaaS applications. For example, like if you have a subscription software and you manage subscriptions by yourself, you might consider that's an option to move to, for example, to Stripe or Recurly or Braintree. The whole mechanism of managing subscriptions, managing billing, managing credit cards, and all that, you might move that out to a payment vendor, and you just deal with your content on your website, and the whole subscription thing is managed elsewhere, and your website becomes much simpler, and it's much easier to migrate it. And that's for example, thing that we've seen clients use quite often. So that's that. The phased decoupled approach of smaller steps is a good way to reduce the risk of replatforming a lot. And then there is migrating off of Drupal. If you have a Drupal website and you don't feel Drupal 11 is for you, you might migrate off of Drupal, and we have some considerations of when that might be the case. So if you have a very small website and you feel managing Drupal 11 is maybe too big of a hassle for you, you're not really changing it a lot. It's just a website of a small business, for example, where you just need the offering and the contact form, and that's pretty much that. Maybe a local restaurant, for example, or something, and you feel Drupal is maybe too big of a tool for you. You might consider moving to WordPress. You might use a SaaS solution for a complete website like a Wix or Squarespace or something. Or for example, if you have a legacy website which you're keeping there, you're not using it anymore, but you have to keep it for legal reasons or archiving purposes, maybe a conference that happened, or maybe an event, or maybe some other reason. You don't have to move it over to Drupal 11. You might migrate it to flat HTML and just have the flat HTML there served. It's cheaper, and then you don't have to worry about security of flat HTML at all. And also there's another situation where your backend and front-end functionality of Drupal is not sufficient. Maybe your system is more of an application than CMS. Maybe it's a SaaS solution. Maybe it's something where you feel you need more control over how it's being developed, how it's being worked. Maybe you need a lot of changes done to it, and Drupal is kind of getting in the way of it. It's a fantastic, elastic, magnificent system. That's what Drupal is. Still, though, if you build a big, complex application, you might feel that you 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 want to have a more detailed control over how things work without having to work through how Drupal wants it to work. And that's maybe when you might want to progressively decouple and maybe move to a headless Drupal, or maybe move to something else completely. So you can move to exactly small websites on something like Wix or Squarespace. You might also have dedicated solutions. So maybe, for example, if you have an e-commerce on Drupal 7, you might look at such solutions like Shopify equivalent, which might give you many more options to grow your business without having to worry about technology. Or for example, you might have a mix where you might have for example, the booking mechanism used, like for example, Booksy for hairdressers or Tablin for restaurants, and some other SaaS software for the whole booking mechanism, which now is built on your Drupal, and you just have the marketing landing pages on your website. And this way, your website becomes smaller and simpler to manage, and your SaaS solution gives you, kind of the best of class, the booking mechanism, for example. So SaaS solutions, obviously, they do have their drawbacks and they have their costs, but on the other hand, if you have to build it on Drupal 11 and you build it by yourself and you have to maintain it, it also has costs, and it has some, advantages and disadvantages. So that's something to consider. And also, you might consider other open source solutions. For example, especially if you have something really big and you feel you want to grow it further and you need fine-grained control over how it works in a very detailed way. You might have, for example, huge amounts of data transactions and distributed workflows or whatever. You might want to custom build something on a lower level framework like Symfony, Laravel, or other. And then you have even more better control of your stack and your destiny on the application. This is obviously a solution for things that were built on Drupal 7 and really, really grew, and now they want to grow further and don't want to be restrained by any decisions made by the CMS. And also there are dedicated solutions. So if you, for example, e-commerce is the best example here. Like there are a lot of open source solutions for e-commerce which are really, really good, like Celius, Magento, and there are many other open source solutions which are specifically designed for commerce, and many commerce systems use them. So they have a lot of modules. So if you're building an e-commerce platform, you might consider choosing something built specifically for this purpose. Right, and now we're going to move over to case studies. I've talked about various options of migrations from Drupal 7. We're going to show you some of the examples of what we've done in the past, and why I'm going to talk you through why these approaches were taken. So we're going to start from here.com, which was migrated from Drupal 7 onto Drupal 8. This was a phase migration to a Drupal CMF. Here we were migrating section by section. So we had some sections on one Drupal 7, we had some new sections on Drupal 8, and the content editorial team was gradually migrating pages and sections. This was a huge rebuild of the whole architecture of how the websites were created. So it couldn't be done manually. We had to do it. Sorry, it couldn't be done automatically. We had to do it manually. So the whole migration was done in stages. Another example is betterregulation.com. This is a resource of legal acts in the UK and Ireland. This is a SaaS solution where lawyers can sign up to get access to curated list of legal acts where they can search them, tag them, compare them, and do all sorts of stuff with them, export them, get notified of new changes and stuff like that. It's a huge database with over 1 million nodes, a huge editorial team making changes continuously, adding new legal acts, adding new versions of legal acts, a whole complex permission system, a whole system for search, a very big application. And here we decided on a full one-to-one migration, for example, the most risky one. But we have a very wide test coverage of the application. We have a very wide test coverage of the data migration. And we have a long period of UAT testing to make sure that everything works as it's supposed to. Yep. Table-in is a different application that we have. It's an application built on Drupal 7. It's also a SaaS software. And this is a situation where Drupal, initially built on Drupal, the application is changed in such a way that if you even log in, you don't feel that it's Drupal. The whole front end was changed in JavaScript to be more of an application. It's very customized backend, a lot of APIs. The system is live 24/7, huge amount of transactions, reservations, and we couldn't migrate directly to Drupal 8. We couldn't do a long feature freeze here because this is a competitor which competes a lot with all the other reservation systems. They have to add new features, they have to change, they have to grow, they have to adapt. So we did here the decoupled approach where we were loading, changing front ends to React and moving over the front end, and then at the same time we were decoupling the back end and moving parts out of Drupal, slowly moving them to other technologies. And for this application, Drupal would not be the right choice. It was good to start on Drupal 7 to iterate quickly and get to a certain stage, but eventually here we have to scale massively. We have to have distributed worldwide access very quickly, live to the data, and we decided to move off of Drupal, and we slowly, function by function, feature by feature, removed these functionalities from Drupal over to Symfony. We also migrated it to cloud, where it's scalable and automatically scales. A different type of migration from Drupal 7. Here is a migration to SaaS. It's an e-commerce which sells skateboards in Poland. It was built initially on Drupal 6, then migrated over to Drupal 7. But at Drupal 7, we decided we're not going to be migrating it to Drupal 8. We're going to migrate it to, that's at least decided with the client, we're going to migrate it to a SaaS solution, and we migrated them to a Shopify-like SaaS solution where it helped the business a lot because it gave them immediate access to all the payment mechanisms, all the Polish delivery services, all the integrations that an e-commerce needs, which on Drupal we would have to write them ourselves, and it would be a huge cost. Here they got them automatically with the SaaS solution very quickly. So we created a migration mechanism, pulled all the data, moved it over to a SaaS solution, helped test the new look and feel of the store, and when it was ready, we launched it, and they're using it for a good while now. It's a very good success for them. Staying on Drupal 8 would be definitely more expensive, and they would be limited with all the options that they get from the SaaS vendor, who obviously with the scale and the particular market they're working in allows them to use many more services. And then we have archiving to HTML. This is an example. We did it for a few clients as well, but an example here is on we are organizing a Drupal camp in Poland every year, and every year after the event finishes, to keep the history of the events, we archive the whole website into flat HTML, and we host it on GitHub pages. And you can see the links here on the presentation to the version of 2022, 2021. Now these were Drupal websites. They're not Drupal websites anymore. It is just flat HTML, and it can stay there forever. We don't have to change it at all. It doesn't involve any maintenance, and we can keep them. 13 versions we've done now. I think 13 Drupal camps, and all the history is there till now. Okay, so this is all from me for today, from this webinar. It was great talking to you. If you have any questions, if you want to ask anything, if you have a Drupal website and are not sure what to do with your particular case and how to approach migrating to Drupal 7, maybe migrating off of Drupal, maybe staying on Drupal 7 longer, if you want, and you're looking for someone to take care of your Drupal 7 website, please contact us. We will be happy to help and talk to you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.